Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to discuss the meeting between Trump and Carney, where Trump still wants and demands Canada to become the 51st state. This is a war against Canada. How does Carney handle it? And our biggest province, Ontario, Rob Ford, has some ideas on that as well. Cal, how do you see Ford's position?
First of all, you got to look at the man himself. He's not the brightest light on the Christmas tree. Uh, he, he's a bully himself. So when you consider his approach to problems, it's not surprising that he suggests that Canada should stand up to a bully because he would recognize a bully when he sees one. If you ever see him in the press releases and that sort of thing, watch the way he holds his hands. His
Yeah,
knuckles are backwards and the arms don't move. It's a strange body language. But anyways, he's threatening to cut off electrical power to 3 U.S. states, which he thinks in some way will cause the Americans to come around to reducing tariffs.
wouldn't
I
it
don't
be
think
like
that's
stirring a hornet's nest, setting
well.
the bees
No,
a
it's
buzzing? Because if we go out of our way and harm the states even further, that might empower Trump to say we're the ones initiating the bad faith and causing harm to Americans, therefore send the military across our borders. That's
it's
something
it's
that could be very dangerous.
it's simpler than that. First of all,
Simpler.
yeah, they're unloading the power, the excess power onto the American market because they can't use it.
Yeah,
In Ontario, they have a mixture of green power, solar and windmills that only produce power when the wind is blowing, the sun is shining. And then they have nuclear power backup. The nuclear power is steady, less expensive. However, when the solar and the wind power is working, you need to get rid of the excess power. It takes
right.
weeks to crank up the nuclear power once you've slowed down the reactors. So there's
Didn't Harper privatize the nuclear reactor so it's a money profit
I
scenario for businesses?
well yeah, it's a business like every other one, but the
Right.
difference is 70 cents a kilowatt guaranteed for wind power versus 5 to 7 cents for nuclear power. So the grid would literally burn up if you didn't get rid of the excess power. So
Wow.
selling it to the Americans is almost a necessity to balance the Ontario grid. So
Yeah.
so
So
you can't really cut that off. What you
that
need to
doesn't make
do,
sense that you'd even recommend cutting that off.
yeah, because he
Ford
doesn't
must
know.
be.
He's an idiot.
There you
And
go.
and the thing is, what you need to do is perhaps charge market value for the power that you're dumping, which is why it's less expensive. It's being
Yeah,
dumped.
that still might harm the businesses in the U.S. if the cost of power goes up, the cost of manufacturing goes up, which means the cost of the products goes up, which still harms the American people at a time where we may not want to implement actions to facilitate the concept that we're causing the U.S. harm, because Trump is looking for any excuse to annex Canada or send the military up here to make us a 51st state. So I like Carney's approach where he's using strategic and measured responses to Trump's bullying tactics. Like it appeared he even started laughing when Trump stated, the 51st state for Canada. So I do like that tactic, but it has to be measured with something that Trump has to see as benefiting the U.S. citizens, but not Trump. And one of the things I kind of looked into a bit, but not too much, was these soybean issue where China's not going to buy any soybeans from the U.S. Now, if I was negotiating with a bully like Trump, I would do something where I make sure that the people being harmed the most from Trump benefit from our ability to help out. And that's where the Canadian government could look at maybe buying, 30-40% of the soybean production from the U.S. We have a ability to store and market it slowly onto the marketplace once we buy it off the American farmers. And we're an agricultural country too, so we could find the markets for it and slowly get rid of the soybean. That would help the farmers, but it would allow the people of the U.S. to see that Canada is a strategic partner and a partner that can help them in times of other countries playing hardball with them. And I think a little strategy like that would go a long ways into having to temper the bully tactics of Trump in negotiations. There are other methods too, like Carney seems to be well connected with the banking industry, and he has bought up a lot of the government bonds of the U.S., so I like that strategy too. But Ford pulling bully tactics on a bully might not be a great idea, like you stated.
Well, you have to pick your targets and pick your battles. And the energy grid sounds good. It sounds easy. It flows across wires, that sort of thing. But it can be problematic. People also forget that the major pipeline from out west goes across the Mackinac Strait
Yeah,
through Michigan, and the governor of Michigan has been trying to shut that down now for a couple of years. It would be very, very easy for the U.S. federal government to walk away from that fight and let Michigan shut the pipeline down. So you have to be careful in how you're dealing with negotiations. Don't forget the duties are hurting Americans. They're the
right.
ones that are paying the duties on the other end of this tariff.
And
So
if we implemented more tariffs, we'd be harming them in a further, which is not necessary. I think the people of the U.S. see the casualty and inflicted harm that Trump has done unto them, and it's becoming clearer and clearer every day that Trump doesn't care about the citizens of the U.S. He just cares about himself. So he's never made so much money in his life as this term in presidency. He's made billions of dollars, and that is borderline criminal in any other country, having a head of your country lining his pockets without any accountability and obvious conflict of interest in the dealings. That is something that Canada doesn't stand for. We see the U.S. as a criminal organization, no different now than the mafia, because they have ICE on the streets there. It's just a matter of time before a Canadian citizen is picked up and thrown in ICE detention again and dies. It's going to happen. We have a lot of people that of skin color that go down to the U.S., and I fear for their safety myself. I had a associate go down there, and he didn't fear it, but you have to look at what state you're going to, and there is always the potential of bad things happening to Canadians in the U.S. So we do have to be careful how we deal with these people.
when you look at Canada's retaliation, the obvious retaliation, if you wanted to do so, is oil and gas. When it's
Yes.
being sold at 66% of the world price, there's room to bring that up to the world price. If you look at power, for example, if you put an export duty, and don't forget it would be an export tax, not a
Right,
tariff,
right.
that would be going on Canadian products, then the consumer at the other end is going to look for other suppliers. The difference with the oil and gas is that the type of oil that Alberta is exporting down the pipeline can't be had so easily anywhere else. So you have a single customer who needs your product, yet the customer is demanding a discount to purchase your product. So that's the
Yeah,
place where the tariff or tax could go on. Now the problem is Alberta will be screaming that you're picking
But
on them.
but
Uh,
it's not really their right to ship product out of our country without the country having a say. So the federal government has to readjust how goods leave our country, and I think that's a very important thing that was overlooked in the Trudeau era of negotiating the province's rights as far as the new constitution. And I'm talking Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I don't think we foreseen that there wouldn't be a federal input into our resources in a battle that ultimately the federal government lost over the National Energy Program, which would have seen more federal jurisdiction and profitability from the selling of resources as a country. And that needs to be revisited on so many levels because we are being ripped off. Since 1979, we've lost trillions of dollars in Alberta and Canada as a result of selling our pipeline, Crown Corporation, and selling out our oil at a cheaper price and paying corporate welfare for oil wells and being stuck with the abandonment costs and the environmental cleanup costs. And as a result of Alberta's childish behavior in the oil industry to cost Albertans and Canada, the federal government needs to step in and put down some new regulations on shipping across borders. And that would help build pipelines and a better infrastructure for our resources, not in the, just alone in oil and gas, but for all our mining and other resources that we have in Canada. And that is a time for, this time dealing with the U.S. is a time to set up to do a major overhaul on how we deal with our resources, because a lot of them are finite, non-renewable. Forest products, lumber, that's renewable to a certain degree, and that we can regrow trees, but we can't regrow oil. That's, or copper or aluminum or uranium. Once those supplies are gone, they're gone forever. So that's, I think Carney has to use this time dealing with Trump to deal with the internal strifes of Canada and the province's jurisdictions over shipping goods out of the country.
but to get back to Mr. Doug Ford again, people have quickly forgotten the fact that there's a green belt around Toronto, which is tied up, and it's a reservation for the future. He had a couple, three developers over at his daughter's birthday party. They agreed what parcels they were going to buy, and then he took it out of the green belt. And of course, the investigation hasn't concluded yet, even though it's been years. So he's not the cleanest politician. One of his cabinet ministers, or at least vehicles that are licensed to the Ontario government, have been caught speeding through speed traps
Speeding, holy
in
crap.
Toronto. Well, the thing is now all of a sudden, Doug Ford is taking all the speed cameras down, saying that it's a money grab. Well, when your own cabinet ministers are paying thousands of dollars in speeding tickets, what are you going to replace that with? Speed bumps? He's the type of guy. He's
Probably
essentially a
will be
pop.
speed bump.
He's a populist. He's the type of guy that will say anything in order
Yes.
to sound like he's doing something. They have a science center that has been around for years in the River Valley in Toronto. He's closing it because I'm sure one of his real estate buddies has a nice little condo project that will go into that place. Like it's distraction, a bunch of distraction. He has no authority over what kind of trade deal Carney negotiates. It's
Yeah, he's
not
just
within the
a
provincial realm.
media hound. He wanted to get his face in the media, pumping BS that sounds good but has no teeth, right?
But what he can do, and here's the example: Degano is a large multinational liquor supplier, and they make Crown Royal. And Crown Royal is produced, distilled in Manitoba, but it was bottled in Ontario. So they're moving the bottle facility down to the U.S. because of the tariff issue. So now he's saying that he's taking Crown Royal off the shelves, and he's going to start taking all their liquor products off the shelf. And of course, we're talking about 168 employees, which isn't that much in the scheme of things to get all excited about. But Crown Royal is a very popular drink in Canada, and to remove that from the shelves in Ontario, apparently that's worth millions and millions of dollars to Diageo products, which include Crown Royal, Smirnoffs, and according to them, contributes 300 million in annual revenue to Canadian restaurants and bars, 125 million of that to in Ontario. Now, talk about a false statistic. If you can't get Crown Royal, you're going to drink something else. If you can't get, there's like 30 different varieties of vodka, so that contribution won't be missed. But the thing is, Ford is just making a big stink over 168 jobs, and they have pictures of him pouring Crown Royal away. It's something else.
Well, in retaliation to tariff and produce being boycotted by Canada and the traffic to the U.S. being less, Trump last week announced new Section 232 levies on lumber, timber, kitchen cabinets, vanities, and other furniture and upholstered products, arguing Canada and other imports are somehow a national security threat. And that's a key word. When he's imposing tariffs, saying a national security threat, we have to be careful on how we do measured retaliations against this sociopath with the ultimate power and his desire to take over Canada as a 51st state. I mean, he needs some sort of conflict to distract against the Epstein files, and he needs another distraction to say that the U.S. is at war so that there's never another election to remove him from power, where he will probably face criminal charges and or prosecutions for his actions that are outside the umbrella that the Supreme Court of the U.S. gave him. So we have to be very careful, and Ford going off just to seek the press and the camera could jeopardize negotiations for Carney, and that is not good either. And it could embolden Premier Smith to try to cut more deals for separation and joining the U.S. like her ultimate plan is. I mean, she is mega supporter, and she went down to meet with Trump directly when she really had no reason to be there. So, and we're still selling our oil from Alberta to the U.S. for cheaper. And she even went in the press the other day and said, if we don't get pipelines to the coast because BC's blocking and feds are blocking, we're going to ship more oil down to the U.S. So she's already piping to re-implement the Keystone XL pipeline as part of her rhetoric to support and get backing from the U.S. industries down there that are ripping off Alberta and Canada. So we do have to be very selective and measured in our responses.
According to the Pembina Institute, the number of oil jobs per 1,000 barrels of oil was 38. It's now down to 22 jobs per 1,000 barrels. And Esso has Imperial Oil has just cut up to 900 positions, most of them in Calgary. Yeah. Now, you don't see the Premier of Alberta saying that we're going to stop giving subsidies to Imperial Oil because they're cutting all these jobs. And yet you see the Premier of Ontario fussing over 168 jobs. So it's a huge disparity between not only provinces but industry.
Well, we're so influenced out here in Alberta by foreign money and foreign oil companies that we don't even realize that we're being ripped off by them. So that's a real problem. And when you have a premier that is supporting the ripoffs and not taking a stance against these people that fund her election campaign, we have a real problem here, folks. I mean, oil flows and it's an easy income. Why on earth would you sell a Crown Corporation that is a pipeline that gets our oil and gas to foreign markets and coastal waters? Back in 1979, it was simply because there was some benefit to selling it privately for later gain. And Peter Lougheed, after being premier, was senior partner of a huge law firm in Alberta called Bennett Jones. And Bennett Jones set up the largest Canadian law office in Texas, and it seemed to ensure that the oil flowed north and south to the refineries in Texas. And if you do a historical analysis of prices paid for that oil, they're way below fair market value for that product. So to make millions of dollars annually for Peter Lougheed's law firm might have been some of the justification of selling off our Crown Corporation. And that would have been one of the largest incomes to Alberta, because right now a barrel of oil transmission is anywhere from $10 to $18 a barrel. We don't even make that as a royalty off the oil being sold. So we lost a huge revenue generator. I mean, how many hundreds of thousands of barrels of oil a day come out of Alberta? That's daily revenue at $10 a barrel, folks. That's huge, and that would lower your taxes. It would deal with our teachers' strike. It could deal with our health care issue. That's a lot of revenue, folks, and we're just seeing it squandered and disappear. But it's like the barn door was open a long time ago and nobody cared. And you can't close the barn door very easy now, and the only people that could possibly close it is restructuring at a federal level of how we deal with our resources. And I think that's what we need to do, and Trump is basically the catalyst for such revamping of our policies federally and dealing with jurisdictions provincially for resources that are non-renewable.
So I guess we're in agreement that Doug Ford is just blowing hot air.
Well, he's full of hot air, and yeah, I don't understand why he thinks he should be sticking his big nose into the affairs of at a federal level, even though he's a big province. He's just making the situation worse as far as I can see. That should be something Carney should sit down with them and actually say, hey, you know, maybe you shouldn't be trying to stir the hornet's nest at this time, or we're all going to get stung. And we may be the 51st state after the U.S. sends the military up here. They see us as a national threat to security already. Trump is gauging responses, hoping we make a response error so that he can justify sending his generals, who he met with a week ago, to discuss war tactics and policies, who's going to follow him into battle. And we could be one of the battlefields, folks, so we have to tread lightly. And Carney is a pretty smart guy, but he has to be able to use consultants and ideas to build a very strong response to having a chess game with Trump. Trump's not the smartest apple in the orchard, but he has people that are fairly smart on tactics, so we have to be prepared and do things that they least expect, like trying to help out the citizens of the U.S. by strategic purchasing of soybeans, or implementing things that benefit the U.S. citizens that Trump has tried to inflict suffering on by strategic maneuvering. So we do have that ability, and I hope Carney sees that and can take some action that benefit Canada with the U.S. citizens that could prevent the 55th state war. We got some interesting times ahead of us, folks, and the fact that nothing came out of this meeting other than Trump, you know, making wild allegations again is not good for us, but at least it isn't bad that we made any mistakes. I don't think
Trump is just the front man. He's got to go back and ask the closet Nazis as
Yeah,
to whether or not, a deal is possible or in the best interest of their MAGA supporters. So it's going to be a while, but taking their time is probably for Canada a smart idea because Trump's tariffs may be deemed illegal, in which case, if you had an agreement based on the threats, it's very difficult to overturn the agreement. But if his tariffs get struck, which is quite likely,
yeah.
then we're back to square one again.
Yeah, and that's the other issue is if you do agree to the extortion methods that Trump is using, threats and extortion, well, that's not good business tactics to begin with, and that's the art of getting screwed as a deal negotiator. The minute you have to use extortion and threats and implied threats, you're not a negotiator, you're a bully. And not only are you a bully, when you have the power of the U.S. government behind you and you're talking to the military and stuff, you're actually a criminal organization. And that Canada realizes. And I think a lot of U.S. citizens realize that the government of the U.S. is acting like a criminal organization, enriching and emboldening the elites, the wealthy, to take more of their resources and line their own pockets at the expense and demise of the U.S. citizen. I mean, would you like to be a U.S. citizen right now? Not a chance. I would not want to be under Hitler at all, and I don't see this regime being any different than Nazi Germany, and to me, I would not want to be a U.S. citizen. Our doors are open up here, by the way. Canada will take refugees from the U.S. that want to escape the tyranny of Trump.
Let me give you some insight here. Unifor, which is a big union, and of course, Doug Ford and his government doesn't like unions, but the president, national president of Unifor, said there's only one answer to this extortion from the U.S. president: push back hard. Canada must use every bit of leverage we have. Workers are counting on our government to defend their jobs and industries. Concessions won't stop a bully, but collective strength will. Now, doesn't that sound awful familiar to what Doug Ford has now been saying? Now,
Yeah,
this comment
puppeting.
was published July 11th, 2025. So Ford is just mimicking what the union said, and it's difficult to imagine those bedfellows.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. But I mean, these are not funny times. We do have to take these tactics of Trump and his pushing of the 51st state and annexing Canada by war or threats is real, and we do not want to give up our sovereignty. I mean, there's no way I'd want to be part of a tyranny government criminal organization called the USA, and that is worth fighting against. And
No, I have a solution. We should
yeah,
all learn Spanish and only speak Spanish. Then he won't be interested in Canada.
no, he'll throw us in alligator Alcatraz or throw us up on an island up north and say freeze to death.
I got to run.
Okay, you take care.
Bye.
Bye. Make sure you subscribe and like. We want to go viral with one of these videos, folks. Help us out. Thanks.